Revisiting Monk 15 years after the series finale reveals some interesting truths about the show, from how it handled Sharona's exit to whether its case of the week formula ever became too repetitive. Monk ran for 8 seasons, originally airing from 2002 to 2009. Tony Shalhoub and the cast of Monk recently reprised their roles for Mr. Monk's Last Case, a Monk movie, a Peacock original film that revisited the beloved detective 14 years after the events of the show. Monk is one of the greatest detective TV shows of all time and has aged surprisingly well. Crime shows where the detective has a quirk or a gimmick are nothing new and continue to be part of the TV landscape. However, Monk took things to the next level by making its titular character extremely relatable despite his Sherlock Holmes-like deducing abilities. Monk was also a very funny series, with Shalhoub's performance stealing the show every time. Monk is as good as ever in 2024, but some aspects of the show stand out on a rewatch. Monk was a formulaic show with very repetitive episodes. Almost every episode of Monk was the same. Monk never tried to be more than just a detective procedural, which had positives and negatives. On the one hand, mystery lovers and fans of the likes of Arthur Conan Doyle or Agatha Christie could enjoy Adrian solving one creative case every week. Monk rarely had two-part episodes or overarching storylines, meaning that Adrian and his friends were dealing with new characters and hanging around in a different location every episode. This approach was the basis for the show, but it got very repetitive sometimes. As fascinating as Adrian was, watching the same episode every week could get boring. From the cold opens showing the crime being committed to the "here's what happened" moment, almost every episode of Monk followed a very well-defined whodunit formula. After the cold open, Adrian would arrive at the scene of the crime, be briefed about the case by Leland or Randy, and start talking with the suspects. Monk would then put things together and realize who did it, which was usually followed by a confrontation with the killer in which they would tell the detective he had no proof to back up his claims. Sharona's departure is still frustrating 20 years later. Sharona was one of the pillars of the show. Bitty Schramm left Monk in Season 3 due to a contract dispute. The show wrote off Sharona by saying that Adrian's assistant was going to return to New Jersey and remarry her ex-husband. Sharona's departure from the story is very abrupt and marks the end of an era for the show, even though Natalia was a great replacement. Monk was never the same again without Sharona, a character whose dynamic with Adrian was virtually impossible to replicate. Having worked with Adrian for years, Sharona had no problem calling him out or telling him what he should do. Leland respected Monk too much to ever talk to him like that, whereas Natalie was a more traditional assistant who treated Adrian as her boss first and foremost. There was a sibling energy between Sharona and Monk that made their relationship hilarious, which was completely lost once Schramm left the show. For those who fell in love with Monk during the first 3 seasons, watching the show after Season 4 was certainly difficult. That said, the series did get back on its feet and continue for 5 more great seasons without Sharona.